Hi, I'm Amy Stasiewicz, and welcome to the Minutes. Thanks for tuning in. It's great to have you along on the Minutes for the week of February 16th. This is the City of Thunder Bay podcast. The Minutes looks at what happened at Thunder Bay City Council this past week. You can find the Minutes wherever you get your podcasts, including our YouTube channel and our website, thunderbay.ca/theminutes. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. This week, City Council met on Tuesday to discuss key issues impacting our homeless community in Thunder Bay, including declaring a homelessness humanitarian crisis and establishing guiding criteria for designated encampment sites. We'll break down the highlights from this meeting, and later I'll be joined by Rilee Willianen, the city's Supervisor for Encampment Response, to talk about these important topics in detail. So let's get started. Like all council and standing committee meetings, the meeting began with a land acknowledgement. City council meetings open with a national anthem, performed by a guest or local group. This week, the performance was by Maddie Boyd, a youth performer from the All the Days Productions. Following the anthem, Mayor Boshkoff asked the audience to join in a moment of silence, sharing heartfelt words to remember and honor the lives lost in the Tumbler Ridge, BC incident on February 10th. Our thoughts are with the Tumbler Ridge community. Then on to the agenda. The first item was a disclosure of interest from Councillor Hamilton. He declared a conflict of interest regarding the motion to declare a homelessness humanitarian crisis, since he is employed by Norwest Community Health Center. Next was the consent agenda items, which included minutes of previous city council meetings, minutes of previous special committee of the whole meeting, minutes from both the finance and administration and quality of life standing committee meetings, the McIntyre Ward meeting minutes, the Lakehead Region Conservation Authority minutes, the Thunder Bay Police Service Board minutes, a memo from Superior North EMS, and finally, a report on Community Efficiency Finance Design Study, which was extracted to be voted on separately. All consent agenda items were then approved by Council. Council met in a closed session earlier in the evening and later shared the decisions in open session regarding the Synergy North Board appointments. Next up was the reports of administration. This week's City Council meeting included two reports. First up, administration recommended that council declare homelessness a humanitarian crisis in Thunder Bay. This would recognize the serious risk to life, health, and safety for people experiencing homelessness. The recommendation follows a February 3rd meeting with leadership from Encampment, also known as Fort William First Nation, NAN, and the city. They acknowledged that homelessness reflects long-standing systemic inequalities and agreed that coordinated action across governments and partners is needed. A declaration would formally recognize the urgency, support practical action, and strengthen joint advocacy with provincial and federal governments. The city is already advancing measures like enhanced encampment responses, temporary housing initiatives, affordable housing investments, and outreach programs, while the District of Thunder Bay Social Services Administration Board coordinates broader housing and homelessness services. Despite these efforts, homelessness continues to rise locally and across Northern Ontario, with northern communities experiencing the fastest growth. In the end, City Council approved administration's recommendation. Administration will move forward with drafting a joint declaration alongside Encampment and NAN, bring together a leadership table with key community partners, and provide updates twice a year to the Quality of Life Standing Committee. The aim is to recognize the current challenges, align leadership efforts, and strengthen coordination to improve safety and overall well-being in Thunder Bay. The next report from administration presented to City Council was to establish the guiding criteria for designated encampment sites. These criteria cover things like site size, access for emergency services, proximity to transit and social services, and year-round usability. Not every factor will fit every site perfectly, but it gives it a clear framework. The plan is to identify up to 3 encampment sites, one in the North Core, one in the South Core, and a third within city limits but not rural areas. The city will consult with community partners, Indigenous leaders, and people with lived experiences before recommending final locations to Council. Council passed an amendment on this item. Rather than sending the report back to the Quality of Life Standing Committee, it will now return to a special committee of the whole, with the meeting date to be set soon. Near the end of the meeting, City Council then reviewed and approved a series of bylaws. There was also a reschedule of standing committee meetings. The Quality of Life will be on March 24th at 7 p.m., and Finance and Administration will now be on March 10th at 4:30 p.m. The meeting was then adjourned. Okay, so that's it for City Council updates. Next, I'll be chatting with Rilee Willianen, the City Supervisor for Encampment Response, to discuss the guiding criteria for designated encampment sites, the 10-part response plan, and more insight into the temporary shelter village. Joining me in the Minute Studio is Rilee Willianen, the City Supervisor for Encampment Response. She and her team collaborate closely with local organizations to address homelessness, working together to find solutions. Today, we'll discuss the guiding criteria for designated encampment sites and the ongoing efforts to support community safety and well-being. Hey, Rilee, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Amy.
Okay, so for listeners who might be new to this, can you explain what the guiding criteria are and why they're important?
Yes, certainly. So the guiding criteria are building on distance guidelines that Council approved back in 2024. The distance guidelines were meant to put some parameters around where encampments should be located, taking into consideration things like neighborhood impact, safety. So, for example, there's a requirement or a guideline for distance that folks are 100 meters away from a school or a playground. So what the distance guidelines did was they put those distance parameters into place, but they didn't account for any operational considerations. For example, if a site can't be accessed by outreach workers, emergency responders, it's not exactly safe. So the guiding criteria put those extra considerations on top of the distance guidelines to then help identify sites to recommend to Council for the designated encampments.
Okay, yes. And you were talking about the distance guidelines. How do the distance guidelines and guiding criteria actually work together? You kind of answered that, but
so I would say the distance guidelines are the foundation, and then the guiding criteria are refining the foundation.
And also speaking about distance guidelines, how did those come about initially? You said in 2024.
Yeah, so the city of Hamilton was kind of the first municipality to put this approach into practice. So we took a look at their distance guidelines, and then we adapted some to be more reflective of our own context. We brought those to the Response to Unsheltered Homelessness Task Force, and then we also brought them to service providers and people with lived and living experience, had them take a look, tell us what they thought. For example, when we brought it to people with lived and living experience, I believe the initial distance guideline for distance to private residences was about 10 meters. They said you should increase that. And so it went up to 20, for example. So it was developed in collaboration with folks that are most impacted by the distance guidelines. And then they were brought to Council for their consideration and eventual approval.
What feedback helped shape these criteria?
So there's actually been a lot of feedback that's gone into shaping these criteria. Back in 2024, when Council first directed staff to go after a designated approach, we were exploring the feasibility of sanctioned versus designated, sanctioned being fully serviced with everything like security, cameras, fencing, lighting, water, washrooms, showers, the whole gamut. What we found was that is expensive and not really within our provincially mandated service mandate. So the designated sites was what we ended up pursuing. But in doing that exercise, we did significant public engagement. And what we found through that public engagement was, and that was with public, business organizations, representatives of business organizations, people with lived and living experience, Indigenous leaders, and service providers. So there was over 1,200 points of feedback in that engagement. And we've found pretty consistent themes across all of the groups. For example, we heard all the time that being close to services and transportation was really important for people. We also heard that people want to feel like they are safe. They want to make sure that their area isn't interfering with other uses, if you will. And so building on that 2024 engagement, we then did some more engagement this year with Indigenous representative organizations and social services, people with lived and living experience, and frontline workers to just further refine what we had heard. Again, the themes were pretty consistent across those groups as well, really reinforced what we heard back in 2024. And so in the guiding criteria, there are criteria that have been informed directly by those consultation efforts. For example, as I had said, the proximity to services, one of the guiding criteria is to be a reasonable walking distance to social services or public transit, which is about 1.5 kilometers.
Okay. Who will be involved in the decision-making process for the 3 future sites?
Yes. So City Council has authority. They will be the ones to make the decisions. What I think will be helpful to explain is the process that staff are going to take in order to get to making recommendations to City Council. So we will be identifying, because the guiding criteria were passed at Council last night, we will be taking a look at the distance guidelines and the guiding criteria, putting them together, and then analyzing sites based on if they meet or do not meet. From that activity, we'll go out and do some public engagement. There'll be a survey that launches next week. There'll be some targeted meetings with business representative organizations, like, for example, the Waterfront BIA, as well as the Fort William BIA, and then an in-person drop-in session where folks can come and talk directly with staff. From that consultation and the analysis of the sites, we will end up putting 3 sites in front of council for their consideration. But at the end of the day, the final decision point is up to them, of course.
Okay. And you mentioned there's a survey, so that'll be a Get Involved survey.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. How do you determine which sites are actually safe, accessible, and workable?
So that speaks to the guiding criteria.
Right.
Several of the guiding criteria speak directly to safety, accessibility, and workability. Accessibility is actually one of the criteria, recognizing that full accessibility might be challenging to achieve in outdoor locations. There's also a criteria around operational access. So, for example, to have people do garbage collection or sanitation, you have to make sure that there's sufficient access to the site to provide those services. And then with safety, there is a guiding criteria, for example, around emergency response access, year-round operability. So the 3, the safe, accessible, and workable, are all covered under the guiding criteria.
Yeah, wonderful. Switching gears a bit, let's talk about the 10-part enhanced encampment response plan. Obviously, you work on that a lot. Can you explain what this plan is for people who are hearing about it for the first time?
So the enhanced encampment response action plan is a city plan, and it really was devised to better coordinate the response to encampments in our community. There's about 10 actions in there, and they're all meant to work together to address the issue, to reduce encampments in our community, improve overall community safety, well-being for everyone. And that was implemented back in 2024.
Okay. And how are these 10 actions in the plan actually developed?
The development of the actions in the plan was really based on a few things. What we hear all the time from the public, what we hear from our service providers that we work really closely with, what we hear from people with lived and living experience, all the feedback from those folks, what they want to see happen, how they think things should go, was considered in the development of that. Also, what we have experienced, like operationalizing our approach and response to encampments, also went into the development of the guiding actions, of the 10 items. And so it really was a collaborative, a combination of what we hear in community and what we see on the ground.
Right. Okay. Wow. To talk about the plan just a little bit more in detail, number 4 of the response plan is the Build the Temporary Shelter Village. Can you give us an update on where things are at with the village, especially during the winter months?
The design build RFP and the operator RFP is a request for proposals, were awarded last year. So that means that we have someone in place who will be operating the village because it won't be the city. And then we also have someone in place who's doing the design and install and supply of the actual units themselves. So that's all been working pretty well over the winter months to get things sort of in place to move on those when we can. The design work is pretty much complete. We also were able to extend the sewer and water up to the property line before things got really cold. The trees had been cleared towards the end of October, I believe it was. And depending on weather, we will hopefully be resuming work in early March to start doing some more of that site prep, for example, grading, and then also bringing the hydro to extending the hydro to the site.
Right. Yes. And my next question, it kind of leads into what you're saying, is what are the next steps for when the ground actually thaws? Like, so say like later spring.
Yeah, certainly need to get the site graded, do all the build things that it's not my wheelhouse, do that kind of stuff. And then after all that is in place, the units will be brought to the site. They'll be installed, and we will have people in there by the end of spring or start.
Okay.
Spring 2026.
Amazing. Yes. And can you share more details just about the village? So, I definitely encourage people to go online on the City of Thunder Bay website, just a side note, because you can see the renderings, which is really puts things in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a bit about these units and like what kind of amenities will be there for residents?
Yeah, so the units are like mini cabin styles, I guess you could say. They have a door, a window. Inside there'll be a bed, some sort of a surface like a desk or a dresser, a lamp. They're climate controlled. And one of the key features is that they have a lockable door. And so something that we hear a lot from folks who live in encampments is that they don't want to lose their belongings. And so having a space to go to, the same space to go to at the end of the day, where you can lock your belongings and then leave them behind, is going to be really transformative for folks. There'll also be on site the community building that will have like a kitchen area that folks can use to do programming. There'll be a laundry and washroom facility on site so folks can keep up with good hygiene. And then there'll also be some office space for the operator to help clients to navigate the systems that they need to be navigating.
Right. And there will also be security.
Yes, yeah. Security on site 24/7, a fenced access point, one entry access point to make sure that the folks that are coming in and out of the village are the folks who should be coming in and out of the village.
Right. That's amazing. And what do you hope the future will look like for the people who will be staying at the village?
Yeah, I hope for stability. I think it's pretty safe to say in the conversations I've had with people who live in encampments that what they are most looking forward to is, as I noted, that having that consistent place to go home to know where your bed is for the night is going to be the same for the night, and that they have somewhere to lock their belongings, a sense of community around. I think we'll see a lot of really positive change in folks' lives because of the stability that the village will bring them.
Right, and just basic needs.
Yes.
Like
food, shelter, water.
Yeah, which some of us take for granted. Yeah. Okay, so you have a team, and your team includes an encampment navigator and a coordinator. So what kinds of things is your team doing out in the community?
Yeah, so love having our team. They are fabulous. They do such great work out in the community. They go and they visit encampments. They talk to people. They find out what they may need. They help to make connections with other social service organizations, do that sort of like navigation piece. They also respond to community concerns about encampments. They chat with residents. They do support voluntary relocations as well. So if someone is in an area that might not be the most suitable, they can help them to transport their belongings to go to another site. They can help them to identify a suitable site. And then they also are working to establish a people with lived experience advisory committee to help us move this work forward. So they do really, really great frontline on the boots on the ground kind of work.
Right. And you need that to connect with, there's so many organizations and like you said, residents who might have concerns. Like it's good to have a face to
yes.
that. Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know that we haven't covered today?
I think I mentioned it already, but I'm going to re-emphasize that the consultation to help to identify those 3 designated sites is going to be coming up. So I really want to stress to folks that we care about your feedback, that we listen to your feedback, we consider it in the work that we put forward. So the survey will be launching next week, and then stay tuned for more details on that in-person drop-in session.
Okay, yes, everyone get involved. So thanks to you and your team for helping to keep our community members both supported and safe, and thanks for taking time to chat with me today.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay, that's it for this week's episode of The Minutes. A big thank you to Rilee Willianen, the City Supervisor for Encampment Response, for joining us. And as always, thanks to you for listening. If you want more information about City Council, agendas, or minutes, visit thunderbay.ca/council. You can catch the minutes every week wherever you get your podcasts, on our YouTube channel, or on our website at thunderbay.ca/theminutes. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. I'm Amy. Thanks again for listening to The Minutes, and have a great week.